Happy Sabbath, everyone. I have been following, and I don't see the Hamels, but the Hamels as well, my friend and mentor, Mr. Chuck Smith in Florida, has been covering the book of Revelation. And so what inspired this message and what reminded me was in Revelation chapter 7. Revelation chapter 7 has a list of the 12 tribes of Israel. Revelation chapter 7. Starts out with, in verse 5, Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Tribe that I notice is missing is the tribe of Dan. What happened? What happened to Dan? I think all of us have our own suspicions, and probably if you've heard this message before, you have a pretty good idea. But we're going to cover it again, but I want us to think about what we heard in the sermonette, about compassion. Compassion in the tribe of Dan. So, if you wouldn't mind, come with me to Genesis chapter 30, if you'd feel so inclined. Genesis 30 and in verse 6. Genesis 30 and verse 6. Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. God has judged her. That's what she says from her own lips. This is what she says. So the word for judge is Dan. Dan is how it's pronounced in Hebrew. But she says, God has judged me. Well, we all know Daniel. Dan is judge. Dani, my judge. El, God. So God is my judge is what Daniel means. But when she says this, skip over one chapter to 31, verse 32. So she has said, God has judged me. Now, when Jacob is contending with his father-in-law, with Laban, he tells his father-in-law, with whomever you find your gods, your idols. The word is teraphim in Hebrew, your idols. Do not let them live. This is a pronouncement by Jacob. Whomever has your idols, Father Laban, should die. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? He doesn't know it's his favorite wife. He doesn't know that. Verse 38. Continuing. Same conversation, Laban and Jacob. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes. E-W-E-S. Your baby lambs. And your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. But what is that word for you, baby lamb? Rachel. Your Rachelim. So wait a minute. That's her name. That is Rachel's name. Never was there a baby Rachel, Rachel, that ever died when I was in charge. Isn't that interesting? Let's go to 35, Genesis 35. Verse 19. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Jacob pronounced the judgment. She dies in childbirth, but the baby survived. But she calls him Ben-Oni, son of my suffering. Jacob, who is already called the supplanter himself in his childbirth, he does not want his child to be stereotyped by son of my suffering. So he changes the name to the son of my right hand, Benjamin. But this is my point. God, I think, my personal opinion, this is Aaron reading in the white spaces. I think God pronounced this judgment through Jacob because of the actions of Rachel. But this is where Dan, this is his mother, through Bilhah. And in chapter 49 of Genesis, Jacob himself is going to make a pronouncement about the tribe of Dan, his son. In verse 31 of chapter 49. 31. Did I do that right? It says that, well, I know where it is. Dan is going to be a viper. That's verse 16, sorry. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent, a nachash. That's the same word you find in Genesis chapter 3. The serpent was more subtle and cunning. Dan shall be a nachash by the way, a serpent, and a viper by the path that bites the horse's heel, so that its rider shall fall backward. What path is Jacob referring to? What path? I think we're going to see. The path that leads, hopefully, to God. As we heard in the last hymn, those who are blessed are forgiven. Genesis chapter 49, 16 through 18, which is what I just read. Deuteronomy 33. Deuteronomy 33. Now Moses, right before the children of Israel are going to go into the land of Israel, is going to make his own pronouncement on the 12 tribes. Deuteronomy 33 and verse 22. And of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan. That's interesting because what their allotment, and I'm going to show you a map later, the allotment that they were given was along the coastline. But the Philistines were there, and the Philistines weren't going to go quietly. So Moses makes a prophecy, he shall leap from Bashan. Bashan is in the north, which is actually where they ended up. In the north. I find that very interesting. And a lion's whelp. When you read throughout the scriptures, Judah are the shock troops. Judah is absolutely the most powerful warriors amongst the 12 tribes. Dan is second. Dan is mentioned as second. So, please accompany me. That was my introduction to Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 10. Leviticus 24, verse 10. Now the son of an Israelite woman, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the children of Israel, and this Israelite son and a man of Israel fought each other in the camp. Well, we know, and this is in the middle, right after, we just heard about the feasts of God. And then we're going to hear about the Jubilee year and the Shemitah, the 7 years of rest. In between this, we get this story. This son of an Israelite woman, if you recall from Numbers, it is patriarchal, meaning it goes through the father. This man is not welcomed in the tribe because his father is a foreigner. His father is an Egyptian. And verse 11, and the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name of the Eternal and cursed. And so they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomit, the daughter of Dibri, from the tribe of Dan. This man fighting with another man who, by all accounts, is a full-blooded Israelite. Doesn't say which tribe he's from. He curses God. He uses God's name as a curse, a precatory. How dare he? But you can't be an atheist. You have to believe in God. But why would you curse God with God's own name? Because that's what a curse is in the Bible. Isn't that interesting? Then they put him in custody that the mind of the Eternal might be shown to them. That's very fascinating because if you recall, the son of an Israelite woman, who do we know that was a surrogate Egyptian that went out amongst his brethren and got into a fight? That would be Moses. Moses did the exact same thing. Now, when Moses was growing up, where was his dad? Well, his dad was amongst the Hebrews. But his stepfather is Pharaoh. He grows up, obviously, with an Egyptian stepfather. Just like this man, whose real father is Egyptian. The similarities, spoiler alert, the similarities that you're going to find through this story have Moses' fingerprints all through it. All through it. So that's in Exodus. I'll read that for you. Exodus 2, verse 11. Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and looked at the burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way, looked that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Premeditated murder. Go back to Leviticus 24 with me. Leviticus 24, so after this man is put into custody, verse 13, and the Eternal spoke to Moses, saying, take outside the camp him who has cursed, and let all who heard him lay their hands upon him. Now we know this from Leviticus. When you make a sacrifice, your participation in killing the animal is first you lay your hands on that animal's head. You are respecting and understanding that that animal is about to die in Leviticus. In here, you are now participating in this man's judgment. You will stone this man, because that's what God tells him right here. You will lay hands on him and let all the congregation stone him. It's pretty strong. It's a double verb. Stone him. Then you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, verse 15, whoever curses his God shall bear his sin. And whoever blasphemes the name of the Eternal shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him. Stone, yes, stone him, because there's no word for certainly in Hebrew. And the stranger as well as him who is born in the land. Goes back to compassion. Equal mates, equal rates, equal measures, equal weights. God is fair, but thankfully he is merciful, as we also heard in that last hymn. But the Eternal says that person shall be put to death. So I want us all to think about the most famous person in the tribe of Dan is Samson. Samson is in the faith chapter. Samson rules over Israel 40 years? No, only 20. When you go through Samson's life, he has a lot of foibles. He has a lot of weaknesses. He has strengths as well. But my focus isn't on Samson, because I think all of us are pretty familiar with that story. Come with me to the chapter right after the demise of the champion of Israel, to Judges chapter 17. Judges chapter 17. Now there was a man in the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Michayahu. One who is like the Eternal is literally what his name means, but you won't find that name for him throughout the rest of the story. Cut off the Yahoo and it's just Micah. His name is Micah throughout the rest of the story. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, on which you put a curse, even saying in my ears, here is the silver. I took it. So this man, Mikayahu, one who was like the Eternal, steals shekels of silver from his mother. Then he says, oops, I heard that you cursed the person that took it. It was me. Here, you can have it back. And his mother said in verse 2, oh, be blessed by the Eternal, my son. So she uses God's name to bless this thief, who happens to be her son. Verse 3, so when he returned the 1,100, of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Eternal for my son, to make a carved image and idol. A molded image, and now therefore I will return it to you. This woman is taking the silver and dedicating it to a pagan idol. Didn't we just hear about idols by the mother of Dan? Yeah, we just did. We just did in Genesis, Rachel. Thus, verse 4, he returned the silver to his mother, and his mother took 200 shekels. I thought it was 1,100. I have public school education, but 1,100 versus 200, what happened to the other 900? Wasn't dedicated, even though she said it was. So she takes 200 of the, not the full 1,100, and gave it to the silversmith. And he made it into a carved image and molded an image, and they were in the house of Micah. Now that word for house is the same word we use in the Bible for temple. Now if you have 1,100 shekels of silver lying around to dedicate to idols, more than likely you're going to have a big shrine. And that says right here in verse 5, the man Micah had a shrine. He made a ephod and a household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons to become his priest. So he dedicates one of his own children to be a Cohen, to be a priest of his version of God. But they do use the Lord's name. They do use the Eternal's name in this story. Verse 6, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Verse 7, now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. So this is a real Levite, a real Cohen, a real priest of God. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem to Judah to stay, for he could not find a place. Well, wait a minute. Didn't we just read the story in Leviticus? Father being an Egyptian, he's not allowed in the area of Dan. This man is sojourning, but he's a Levite. But how much apportionment did the Levites get? Zero. No land for the Levites, but he also comes from Judah. So he's a mixed himself. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed, and Micah said to him, where do you come from? And he said, I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am on my way to find a place to stay. Verse 10, Micah said to him, dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me. A father and a priest? What? That's what it says. And I will give you, I'm going to give him money. I'm going to give you 10 shekels of silver per year. Well, obviously, if they have 900 that they didn't dedicate, they got some silver lying around. I'm going to give you new clothes. I'm going to give you food, your sustenance. So the Levite went in, and the Levite was content to dwell with the man. And the young man became like one of his sons. Wait a minute. So Micah says, I want you to be a father and a priest to me. And he became one of his sons. Interesting. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. And then Micah said, now I know that the Eternal, he invokes God's name, will be good to me since I have a Levite as a priest. He is using the circumstances, thinking that God is blessing him on circumstances, not on obedience, not on faith, on his circumstances. Those of you that want to go with me to Exodus chapter 2, Exodus 2, we were just there, verse 15. So, when Pharaoh heard of the matter, Moses killing the man that we mentioned earlier, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs of water of their father's flock. Now we have a priest, Jethro, who's about to be introduced, but this is a priest, so this is connecting to the last story that we just read from Judges 17. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to Reuel, friend of God is what his name is here, but it's Jethro, literally, their father, he said, "How is it that you've come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian man delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and he also drew enough water for us to water the flock." Now, wait a minute. We all know this story, but Moses becomes, he's already a Levite, but he becomes the priest for God's people. Aaron is chosen as the high priest, but Moses is above Aaron. But yet he's in the house of Jethro. So he's like a son and a priest. But yet he's also God's representative, so it's like a father. You see the similarities. This man, in Judges 17, says he was pleased to dwell. Right here you have Moses was pleased to dwell in verse 21 of Exodus 2. It's the exact same words. Vayish Vusham. He was pleased to dwell there with Jethro. The Levite was pleased to dwell with Micah. You have Moses' fingerprints, and it'll be really obvious as we get closer to the end. He's given him a wife, and she bore him a son, and his son is called Gershom. Ger means stranger, Shom means there. Moses was a stranger there. That's why he gets his name. This name will be repeated in Judges 18. Let's go to Judges 18. Samuel, there you are. Judges 18, beginning in verse 1. In those days, we hear it again, there was no king. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites were seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. Isn't that interesting? Out of all the tribes, the one that would not allow a foreigner to reside with them, because that's against the law, and we just have to follow the law. Where's the compassion? The one tribe that does not allow the foreigner to stay with them is now seeking rest for themselves. I find that a coincidence. So, for until that day, their inheritance amongst the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. Verse 2, so the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor, from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. And they said, go search the land. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim and the house of Micah and lodged there. While they were at the house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. Recognized his voice. This Levite, who we will get his name at the end, he's famous. Very, very famous. So they recognized his voice, and they turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have going on here? And he said to them, verse 4, thus and so Micah did for me. He hired me, and I have become his priest. So they said to him, please inquire of God, that we may know where the journey on which we go will be prosperous. This is a priest in a little cult, in a little shrine or temple, not praying to the God, or else obviously they wouldn't have the little shrine, the little idols, and a little cult. He's now going to inquire, and he says, go in peace. The presence of the eternal be with you on your way. Well, if you recall, when Moses asked his father-in-law for permission, because God had called him after the burning bush, what are the literal words that Jethro tells Moses? Go in peace. Exactly the same you find here. Verse 7. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there and how they dwelt safely, meaning unguarded, in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. No rulers in the land who might put to shame for anything. They, far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties to anyone or with anyone. Completely isolated. Now remember, they're spying out the land. That's what it said earlier. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said, "What is your report?" And they said, "Arise, let us go up against them." Wait a minute. Aren't these fellow Israelites? Aren't these brothers and sisters? "For we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Do not hesitate to go. Enter to possess the land." This is like Joshua 2.0. They're going to conquer the land, but they're conquering it from also fellow Israelites. "When you go, you will come to secure the people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands." Now they're invoking God. "A place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." Anyone that's been up to the northern part of Israel will tell you it's very lush. It's gorgeous up there. Very green. Verse 11. "And 600 of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Eshtaol, and armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped in Kirjath-jearim in Judah. Therefore they call the place Manedan to this day, as it is Kirjath-jearim. And they passed there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah." So they're going up straight north through Israel, and then they're going to cut over north of the Sea of Galilee. "Then the 5 men who had gone out to spy the country of Laish," this is verse 14, "answered and said to their brethren, 'Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molded image?'" So they're already thinking idols, and there's an ephod. Isn't that fascinating? This is what they're talking amongst the 5. They're talking with the rest of them, the other 600. "Now therefore consider what you should do." Verse 15. "So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 armed men with their weapons of war, the children of Dan, stood at the entrance of the gate. Then the 5 men who had gone out to spy the land entered, took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the molded image." This reminds us once again of Rachel. "The priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image, and the priest said to them, 'What are you doing?' And they said to him, 'Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us.'" This goes right back to what we saw before earlier. Not only was this quoted in chapter 17, but this is a reference back to the Levite who will be a father and a priest, which we saw with Moses and Jethro. So the priest's heart was glad. Verse 20, "And he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. Then they turned and departed, and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were a good way away from the house of Micah, the men who were in the house near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. But they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned around and said to Micah, 'What do you want? And why have you gathered such a company?'" So Micah is chasing them down to get his pagan idols back. Probably to get his Levite back too. So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and you have gone away. Now what more can I do? How can you say to me, what's troubling me?" Verse 25, "And the children of Dan said to him," this is a warning or a threat, "Do not let your voice be heard amongst us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan, verse 26, went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Now, if you recall, Wasn't there a curse at the beginning of this story? Right? Whoever took this silver, cursed be him or her. And then she tried to take back the curse. Did she? Any more than Rachel with stealing her father's gods and Jacob pronouncing the death curse on anyone who had them? Can you take back a curse? That's my question that I have for all of you. I'm not going to answer that because I don't really know myself, but this is my thought-provoking element of this message. Can you take back a curse, even privately, just between you and yourself, what you say? Can you do that? Verse 27. So they took the things Micah had made, and the priest who had belonged to him, and went to Laish, northern part. Yeah, here we go. Let's see if I can do a little. No. Yes. No. Yes. So this is the tribe of Dan. Yay, you can see it up there. Tribe of Dan. Most northern part, I think I read it was something like 10 kilometers from Caesarea Philippi on the north, so it's the most northern part of the border. But it gives you an idea about what it looked like. Laish, north. And to the people who were quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city. Killed everybody. And there was no deliverer because it was so far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, which is what we saw on the map. And with the name of Dan, their father who was born to Israel, Jacob. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. Drum roll, please. Now we have the revelation of the name of Levite. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of captivity of the land. This is the time of the judges. This is in the 14th century BC. They go into captivity in 722 to 718. Do the math. That's over 600 years. That's a lot. Around 500. That's a lot. But who is this son of Gershom, stranger there, and son of Manasseh? One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Now, which one of these things doesn't belong in that text? Ben Manasseh. What is that noon? Does everyone see that? What is that noon doing there? In the Masoretic text, which I don't know if any of you who have Bibles have footnotes, but if your footnote is there, you will read what his name really is. Manasseh. You take out that noon, that's Ben Moshe. Moshe, son of Moses. This is the grandson or great-grandson of Moses the Levite. That's why his voice was very recognizable. He's famous. We can talk about nepotism later if you want to in the after chat. Son of Moses, but the Masoretes altered God's word and put in this letter. But they put it in a way where it's like, it's not our fault, it's just, you can tell. They added to God's word. They changed it. That's why a lot of your translations will say son of Manasseh, which is what, with an N, a nun, that's what that means. Mem, nun, shin, hey, Manasseh. You take out that nun, it's Moshe. Grandson of Moses. Leads them into idolatry. Please come with me to Ezekiel chapter 48, the last chapter in Ezekiel, chapter 48. Let's go to verse 32. Talking about The exits of the city, now this is clearly a reference to the future New Jerusalem. And it talks about the gates of the city. Verse 32, on the east side, 4,500 cubits, 3 gates, one for Joseph, one for Benjamin, and one for Dan. Dan is referenced here, even though he's not in Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. But he's right here. We know that Samson is in the faith chapter. But in verse 35 of Ezekiel 48, all the way around shall be 18,000 cubits, and the name of the city from this day shall be the eternal is there. So the reason why I was inspired for this message was for the compassion. We started out talking about the man who cursed God. So a man curses God and he's killed for it. But could he change his lineage? Could he go back and alter that his father was an Egyptian? No. He's trying to be a part of the Israelites. But he doesn't belong. The law states. Now, what he could have done is like the daughters of Zelophehad. Remember the daughters of Zelophehad in the book of Numbers? Their patriarchal lineage was gone. They died in the wilderness, but they weren't a part of the rebellion of Korah. And they presented a case to Moses. Only through the male heir. But we don't have a male heir anymore. And they presented it to Moses. Moses presents it to God. God hears the case and says, yes, the daughters of Zelophehad have a just case. This man could have done the same thing. He could have gone to God. He could have sought God. But he didn't. And he died. The other man that gathered sticks on the Sabbath, you find that in Numbers, he too did what was unlawful. And God said, surely he will die. This is the example. How many people since have gathered sticks or worked on the Sabbath? I presume many. Did they get struck down? Did they have to be stoned with stones? The point is that God is calling us to understand, and I appreciate the sermonette going into the legalese of the Jews, but the Pharisees and the Sadducees did not have the heart, did not have the real compassion and mercy, the weightier matters of the law. They believed that their God existed, but the God existed in their minds and their perception of how they applied God's word. It's how they applied it. All of us, I hope, can learn the lesson of what happened to the tribe of Dan. It was idolatry. Not for 1 year, not for 100 years. 500 years they intentionally disobeyed God. I hope all of us, when we sit back and we think about our walk, our journey, as we are examining ourselves before Passover, that we are reminded that God is very merciful. God is very compassionate. But God has a limit. And when we put anyone or anything before the God of the Holy Bible, that is a version of idolatry. So brothers and sisters, I hope that this leaves you on a high note, that even though Dan is not there in Revelation 7, but they are listed in Ezekiel 48. Shabbat Shalom.